what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and World of Warcraft Dragonflight was officially unveiled today as WoW's newest expansion, upcoming sometime in the near future. We actually didn't get a date today, which is a bit unfortunate, but we did get a lot of information on a large talent overhaul, a new race in Drakthir, a new class in Evoker, dragon riding, I believe, the Return of Renown, dungeons in, I guess, Season 1 of Dragonflight, and a lot of information that also came out after the actual trailer and deep dive had concluded. So in this video, I want to talk a bit about the trailer. We'll watch the actual unveil. People want to see the reaction. A bit what we learned in the trailer, new talents, I guess the talent overhaul, those systems that were fleshed out in the actual deep dive, and then look a bit into the interviews that were done post deep dive and post trailer, I guess, launch. So with that being said, let's just jump right into it with the World of Warcraft Dragonflight trailer and reaction. Dragon Isles. There it is.
The world has been sundered.
Is that Alec? That voice.
It cries out in pain. We must go to its aid.
Is that Alex Straza? What's that voice?
We entrust our ancestral home to you, the Watchers. Let the land slumber, hidden even from our own eyes. You will feel our return in the waking of the land. Then you must light the beacon of Tearhold, lest the path home be lost to us forever.
Me this morning, yeah, and it was, dude. 10,000 years of sleep. It's like Titan and stuff. Poor guy. He's gonna light the beacon, right? Dude, it literally is Lord of the Rings-esque, like. That's not me, no shot. Maybe a little bit. GG. There it is. Is that gold, blue, green? Is it bronze? Was that bronze? That's cool.
The world is healing.
All the five flights are there too, right?
Uncertain. Together, we shall be Azeroth's protectors once again.
Yeah, they're all there,
Here,
right? Yeah.
The new age of dragons shall begin.
So that was the logo. So I don't know about you guys, but that expansion trailer really hit on basically everything that I wanted to see in a new expansion. I didn't want to go fight another planet and travel through time again to fight some intergalactic being or death itself or whatever. I wanted to go back to an expansion that really just felt like the games were it used to be, in a sense, like going back to Azeroth and just fighting, smaller, lesser threats, which sort of is what Dragonflight is. You're trying to help the Dragonflights reestablish what they had 10,000 years ago by also dealing with smaller threats along the way. I think some expansions really need a big bad villain to follow for the entire expansion, sort of like Shadowlands, albeit the Jailer was sort of, forgettable, like Illidan in TBC, like Arthas in Wrath. Yeah, in Wrath, good lord. I'm getting old here. But I think Dragonflight is going to do a really good example based on what we've seen of not having one big bad villain and much like smaller, lesser threats that build up over the course of an expansion, maybe leading into something better. But that trailer hit on so many things I wanted to see. But there are a few systems and things that I want to talk about a bit more here. And number one, it is the revamped talent system. Now, I'm going to be honest, I am excited to see Blizzard taking a chance on a revamped talent system like this. I am a bit more partial to the classic TBC talent trees where you had a bit of customization, right? So from what we've seen, all we've seen is druids so far, unsurprisingly, druids. You have your druid points available tree and your balance points available tree. So the druid tree has 4 different initial rows here. I would assume balance, resto, guardian, and feral, sort of what you're probably going to see for other specs having just 3 and not 4, because druid is like that, having 4 specs. And the actual abilities in these rows here, some of them are like this, which don't have any kind of actual points in them. They just have like this baseline ability. I think this is Sunfire. So number one, it makes me wonder how many abilities are going to end up being like this. Like, do you just unlock like Sunfire and like Star Surge and things later on? Or are these certain things that you have in your baseline toolkit and they're improved upon? Now, like for this, for example, is this like an improved Moonkin form? I'm actually not sure. I don't know. I guess we'll end up finding out. I would assume this, without like any kind of number in it, is probably like some kind of just learning a new ability spell. Maybe like this builds upon it. For example, here, like it increases the damage of Sunfire by X%. And then you also have abilities like this. I believe this is Innervate. This is Cyclone, Typhoon. I think this is Wild Growth, I'm pretty sure. And you have some hybrid abilities here too, which have, 2 points in them. And these weird like hexagon squares here as well that have the option of choosing different talents, which you can see here. You see in the final rows over here as well. So you have your basic like druid, warlock, warrior, mage, whatever points available, which have more generic-esque abilities in them. I believe this is probably like an increase to bark skin damage. You have your interrupt here, bash, or whatever it is. So number one, it opens up a lot of possibilities because it means you can sort of be like half of a balanced druid, half of a feral druid. If you want, maybe balance still has solar beam, for example, right? But if you want, bash or whatever this thing's called, the interrupt, you can maybe talent into here to get bash and then have the rest in boomkin points if it doesn't make the big of a difference. You can run hybrid specs, which we saw in the past in Classic and TBC. Shockadins, Guardian Druids playing half of Feral, half of Resto or whatever. I guess Feral Druids back then, but it's cool to see. It opens up a lot of possibilities when it comes to, lessening the homogenization of, specs and classes. Now, I would assume it's going to be like one general build that most boomkins or druids and things play in general based on what, spec you choose here. And that's been the case for a very long time, looking back to vanilla and even TBC. But at times in those periods as well, you had a few points, like talent points, that you might have been able to put in any spot. For warlocks, you might have had a few points extra in improved healthstone. Some might have had it in instant cast corruption. So it gives you a bit of customization as to what you want to do with your baseline class points and maybe even your actual spec points here too. Now, I'm not really sure what these icons on the side here mean. I mean, this is Rebirth, this is Stampeding Roar, this is Starfall, I believe. I think this is Celestial Alignment. I'm not sure if you gain these just along the way, or if you have them passively, or if you need to unlock these, like this row here, to unlock this, and this row here as well. I'm really not sure. I guess we'll just find out based on, I guess, alpha and beta. But I do really like the general just class tree, which opens up the possibilities of getting maybe double kick if you want for a boomkin. Maybe a bit more of a resto take on Feral or Guardian at the same time. And then the spec-based talent tree here, once again, I mean, you just might unlock Sunfire here, baseline, and this ability here, improve Sunfire. Sunfire, I think this is Convoke, this is Celestial Alignment, I think. I believe this is like Starfall, maybe an improved Starfall. This looks like an Arcanic Pulsar ability, I think. Treants are here, maybe an improved Moonkin form, maybe improved Starfire, I think. Right? I think I'm saying boomkin things right. Yeah, we'll see where it goes, but I'm really happy with the talent change, the potential talent change, and seeing Blizzard take a bit of a risk here, but I do think that WoW talent trees for the most part have become a little bit outdated, and it's cool seeing them take a step, hopefully in a direction to, change that. And one final thing, talents, from what we understand, are changeable wherever you want, at will, without any tomes or weirdness going on, and you can save profiles too, which allows you to change in the middle of a world, doing quests, going into a dungeon, PvP, without going to see a trainer or anybody with a tome or popping a tome. It seems to be very, very user-friendly, which, well, honestly, after Shadowlands, is really cool to see. So, on top of that, there has been a few things already data mined about tier sets as well, which is very interesting because, I mean, they did confirm that tier will be returning in a later interview here, which we'll get to in a minute, but they already have initial concept art for new tier sets. Now, tier, for the most part, I would say has been a pretty big hit in Shadowlands in the final patch here, and I personally love tier. I'm a huge fan of it coming back because it gives you, like, the option to have, I don't know if the option's the right word, it allows for Blizzard to tweak and tune classes every patch based on tier sets and based on performance and things, right? Tier that changes the way you play rotationally or changes talents, changes the way a class or a spec performs is really cool. Some are passive, some are a bit more, some are passive, some are a bit more, blunt, I guess you can put it, based on what they do. Some things change rotations, some just say, hey, you do more damage when you cast this ability, and it's the same rotation as you had before, but it still feels cool, obtaining 2-piece, obtaining 4-piece, and just getting that extra player power on your character. Now, these are all the concept arts for, I believe, the first raid. They said, the raid tier concept, which looks pretty cool. I believe this is the Warlock one here. This is Demon Hunter. This is Invoker, I believe. This looks like Druid to me. I think they said it was, I forgot what it was. They've been guessed already a bit. I forgot what it said it was. It's not Druid though. I think it was like Monk possibly, maybe. But either way, Warlock has horns. I guess all three of us do at this point, but yeah, it looks pretty cool, and to me, it sort of beats out the Shadowlands tier sets we've seen so far, because don't really wear mine very much. So, and these tier sets seem to be related to the Elemental Proto-Dragon leaders, which, you do see a bit in the actual trailer here as well. So, super cool. Now, another thing that scares people when this post went up is Renown returning for WoW Dragonflight. This is interesting. Advance all reputation simultaneously. So basically what this says is Renown is returning in Dragonflight. It's going to take a while for me to fix that. But it's similar to the Renown we have now, but also a bit different. So Renown, I guess for the majority of Shadowlands, even up till now, is essentially locked to one covenant. You're one covenant, and that's all you can really do. You can swap covenants, but you have to regrind that Renown simultaneously. You can grind Renown for all reps simultaneously here, essentially at the same time, without any kind of large covenant restrictions in place, which, number one, makes the system a lot better for me, and From what we've seen, there doesn't appear to be any kind of borrowed power behind the Dragonflights. Now, I'm sure they're going to elaborate more over the next few weeks and months leading up to Alpha and Beta, but I think Renown would be a very, very good system to have in in Dragonflight, as long as there's no player power tied to it. If there's like some, Necrolord, Kyrian, Venthyr, Night Fae shenanigans where one's better than the other, it's going to feel terrible. I think personally, it's going to feel bad if you have one ability that's better than the others. You have to choose that Dragonflight and grind it out, and you're forced into that one Dragonflight Covenant, based circle, click, whatever you want to call it. So using the word Renown here is a bit scary, but I think this is a much better improved version of Renown, which I think will look pretty good once Dragonflight actually ends up hitting. And they also reference here that looking back for feedback and things extends to recent history too, taking elements from an expansion like Shadowlands and reimagining them for the return to Azeroth, which once again, that's a Renown. So we're going to be seeing an advancement to the Renown system that we use in Covenants, which we think is a really cool way to set up a reputation in a way that feels fresh for World of Warcraft. So it essentially seems to be the new rep grind of the expansion. Instead of hitting Exalted, you just hit Renown 20, 40, 60, whatever it's going to be, and you have that rep, that status in, said Dragonflight or said flight. So overall, pretty cool. If it works out with no player power being tied to it, I'm a large fan of Renown returning in that form. Now, in similar fashion to what we saw in 9.1 and 9.2, when we had those deep dives, Blizzard actually had a few interviews they did ahead of time with IGN. One, I believe, here as well with JudgeHype, which talk a good bit about systems in Dragonflight, which we don't really know a whole lot about, or didn't get a lot of info about in the deep dive. So I did read the IGN one earlier and watch it. We'll talk about it a bit here. One of the questions was about Master Loot. Is it coming back? What are their plans with that? And they mentioned nothing specific to announce on Master Loot, but they're not very happy with personal loot and its complexities. Shameless plug there, over there, in the screen, other part of the screen. Okay, my complexity banner. This is terrible. Anyways, causing frustration when you can't understand why you can't trade something, which I totally agree with. Now, I think the best way to solve the issue with Master Loot not being in game for Race to World First, and even just trading of gear in general, is to make all gear tradable regardless of whatever you loot, or make nothing tradable at all. And that's just that. Now, the better option, I think, is to make everything tradable, because nothing tradable means a million more split runs and things, not even just for Race to World First guilds, but, guilds in higher contention. But either way, making everything tradable has some downsides there as well. We'll see where that goes. A question about the Great Vault. They mentioned they're overall happy with how the Great Vault felt and this played out. There's room for improvement and something that they're continuing to iterate upon, similar to the sockets in 9.2, which was a great change. People asked for a while, where are sockets at in 9.2? We now know that just not taking an item from the vault means you can buy a socket, which is a bit of player power per week, even though, you didn't really get an item. You got a hole in it, so that works. Also mentioning that weekly structure to complement Mythic Plus and PvP makes sense, and they feel that the Great Vault is a better system than single item chest in Legion and BFA, which I agree with as well. Having multiple choices really helps allocate certain pieces of greater power to your character when the weeks go on. It feels terrible opening the same Hadal's Nautilus 4 weeks in a row, or 2 out of 4 weeks in a row on your character that has 2 better trinkets in the first place anyway. So very happy with this change as well, or I guess the mindset of not changing the Great Vault heading into Dragonflight. Good to see. Now, we talked a bit about talents already. The goal is to maximize flexibility and return to being a hybrid, which is really cool. Are you at Holy or are you at Prot? Which, yeah, that's pretty legit, because both specs, or I guess sub-specs, whatever you want to call them, Holy and or Prot, if you're Ret, bring a bit more, bring different things. Prot, maybe a bit more tankiness, versus Holy bringing a bit more utility, maybe a bit less damage overall. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of choices, a lot of min-maxing to make at that point in time. I am probably not very happy if I am an APL writer for raid bots at this point. There's going to be a lot to deal with and micromanage, but in that sense, but in the sense of having, hybrid specs, it's pretty cool. I'm happy with it coming back. Now, we also spoke a bit about having, being able to change talents at will and having different loadouts and profiles saved, which is what's being mentioned here. Good, solid change overall. The final thing here in the interview is professions, and I wholeheartedly agree with this. I think professions going into Shadowlands look really good, and in the end, they have never been less relevant than they are in Shadowlands. They also agree and say professions have lacked depth and an identity in WoW. I think especially just the last few expansions. The closest they've been is back in the day. It's old when you went out and collected all the enchants. People could seek you out. If you were the person that had every pattern on the server, they knew who you were. I remember my person on my old server who had every pattern. This person online, can he enchant this for me? And that feeling has been lost, which I think is partially due to how gaming has changed and things and WoW has changed over the past few years. But I do also think that they could definitely come back and try and find that if they set out to change professions in a certain way. So they did mention that work orders and collaborative crafting can be a thing. You can put a work order on the auction house, or you can list, this is what I can make. Here's your commission. If you have the mats, mail it to me and I'll make it for you, which is really cool. That will help with that a good bit, and I hope bring a bit more identity back to professions, well, as a whole. Now, this last interview here with JudgeHype, I have not even read yet, so I'm going to read through it with you guys because it came out recently. So 10.0 pre-patch event. The pre-patch event is planned to last 2 weeks. It will introduce players to Dragonflight. A level 60 revamp of a classic dungeon, Oldemon, is planned for the event, which is pretty cool. I believe they mentioned Oldemon could be a dungeon in Dragonflight itself, which is also pretty interesting. Drag Theory Evokers will be available to players during the pre-patch event. So I just read this for the first time. So very similar to Demon Hunters. You're able to get them going in the pre-patch event, get them to 60, or whatever the level was back then, get them to max level and have them ready for the actual expansion launch. Now, they won't have tier gear, I would assume, but that's still really cool to see. Editors note there was no discussion of how Evokers would be initially available to players, but for reference, in Legion, Demon Hunters, were first available in 7.0 pre-patch. Yeah, so I assume it'll be the same thing. You have a chance to gear them up, get used to them, play them, and then just go from there. Dragon Isles and Dragon Riding. The Dragon Isles are located northeast of the known as Azerothian landmass. Sure. It's hard to pin down how big the Dragon Isles are, but it's considered one of the largest continents ever offered to players, which is very, very cool. Earlier in an interview, they referenced some of the zones being like Stranglethorn Vale, having large open areas to feel dangerous and sort of have that come explore me, but it's dangerous kind of feel to them, which is very cool. Blizzard studying adding dragon riding to all other WoW outdoor content, but the current focus of the system is for Dragon Isles. This is very cool too. I had not seen this at all. That's really cool. Dragon riding looks pretty legit. If it ends up being the same as like flying, I don't know why you'd take flying anymore. Just dragon ride everywhere, right? Lore and Drag Theory Evokers. There's a new big bad in Dragonflight, but just like Mr. Pandaria, the big bad won't be known initially. So, I mean, there is, but yeah, it's not like we talked about earlier. It's not like the Jailer or Illidan or Arthas who's just terrorizing everybody from day one. We're starting Dragonflight by learning about threats to the Dragon Isles, just like we did with the Shah and Mogu and early mop. Exactly. So, here we go. Khaglar, Rathian, and Tyrande will be important characters in Dragonflight. Players are expected to learn more about Galakrond, as well as the different aspects and other kinds of dragons that existed in the past. Drag Theory Evoker characters will ultimately have to choose between Alliance and Horde, but the choice will be done in a different way from how Pandaren went in Mist of Pandaria. Relations between Horde and Alliance are more peaceful, and the choice will boil down to what expedition the Drag Theory player wants to aid. It's being dressed as more of a practical decision than a philosophical one. So, I mean, at this point, you're going to have cross-faction raiding, maybe even cross-faction guilds, so it might not even be that big of a choice or anywhere near what it is now in 9.2, but we'll see. World First Race. The Sepulchre of the first one's World First Race lasted a bit longer than Blizzard would have liked. Unsurprising. At the same time, they believe players would also have been disappointed if the raid was defeated in less than a week. I agree. 10 to 11 days is considered the ideal length for a race, but balancing a raid towards the best guilds in the world has proved to be a challenge. Certainly, I think having the race longer, I'd much rather have the race go longer and be overtuned the way that it was, and guilds kill the boss eventually through tuning and gearing, than have it be a 3-day race like we had in Emerald Nightmare and things, where the bosses just fell over and that was a complete disaster. So, professions, currently no plans for a return to archaeology, which, okay, sure. Gameplay, no Azerite/artifact power system is planned for Dragonflight. That's a bit disappointing. I liked AP to a certain extent, but a progression system is expected to be included, but player feedback from Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands is being considered. So that's fair. We'll see. Flying with your Drake using dragon riding is currently limited. You'll need to unlock elements like speed, and flying in certain places in the Dragon Isles will require completion of certain prerequisites. Blizzard still believes that the best way to first experience content is from the ground up, instead of allowing players to complete freedom to fly from day one. So I guess you'll have certain parts of dragon riding from day one, but not the actual whole, you can fly anywhere wherever you want to go. So Some time getting it is to be expected, as Blizzard likes that a portion of players will unlock certain things at once. Sepulchre, the first one's time getting being given as an example. Sure. And oh yeah, I think that about wraps it up, except for this one big point right here that no one's talked about really yet. The current plans for Dragonflight Season 1, this is a big one, is to include a dungeon rotation with a pool of 4 Dragonflight dungeons and 4 dungeons from older expansions. Season 2 will change the rotation to include 4 different Dragonflights, I would assume dungeons, in 4 different older expansion dungeons. Shadowlands dungeons, thank God, will not be included in the rotation. So I personally am not a huge fan. I think old dungeons are cool to work in. 4 seems fine, but I don't think limiting the dungeons that are available in the new expansion, especially for like for a whole season, is a good idea. Having 4 new dungeons, it'll be like 8 sort of, depending which ones they choose from the past. But having like 4 new dungeons that sort of fit the storyline just seems like, when you have 8 available, it seems like it's a bit off and not the best call overall. We'll have to see how it plays out. But also, if those 4 dungeons are bangers and they're a hit off the bat and they're gone for a whole season, that feels pretty bad. So I hope Blizzard maybe reconsiders this, depending on how feedback goes. This is one of the first things when we get into alpha and beta. If this becomes an issue, we'll see how they actually react to feedback, because they've said, you know, even in this deep dive, that they want to take player feedback into account much more. So we'll see where it goes. This is the one thing that sort of scares me reading this. I did see this earlier. But yeah, we will see where it goes. So like I said, overall, I'm pretty happy with Dragonflight. Things look pretty good. And hopefully, you know, we'll be in an alpha in the next few weeks, maybe month and a half, 2 months-ish, and have a date sooner than later. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope the video helped answer any questions you might have had about the Dragonflight expansion unveiled today, and some systems through the interviews that were afterwards that, you know, might have not been talked about in the actual deep dive. Now, I think it's pretty cool that they end up doing these interviews on the side after every deep dive. I sort of wish some of the information would be conveyed in a bit of a better way without having to find out through an interview that, you know, if the question hadn't been asked, we might not have heard the answer to. But regardless, it's cool to see them referencing that, hey, you know, we do want to take player feedback into account more. We have been doing it for Dragonflight. And like I said, this expansion looks pretty good to me. Like, basically everything they mentioned, I'm excited about. I'm excited to go back to Azeroth to have a bit more of a relaxed kind of expansion. I'm tired of the intergalactic space travel, chasing the ultimate, you know, big dude of the century who can snap his fingers and kill the whole planet at will. I'm tired of that, man. That's where I'm going to go back to Azeroth and have a baseline kind of expansion. And it seems like Dragonflight is that. It honestly has a lot of MoP vibes to it, which, I mean, you know, I didn't really play a whole lot of MoP. Heard it was pretty decent, but we'll see where that goes. So if you guys have any questions that weren't answered in this video, or you guys are just curious about in general, feel free, drop them down below in the comment section. And while you're down there, also let me know what you guys think about Dragonflight. I'm curious to get y'all's takes on it. I think like the majority of the communities felt pretty good about it. I've seen some saying that they were a little disappointed in it, and, you know, I'm curious as to why. So let me know what you guys think down below. And while you're down there, also hit the sub button and like button. It helps out a ton. Now, at the same time, if you want to discuss the actual expansion live or come by and watch stream, there's a link down below where all my profiles and week warriors and add-ons are at too. I stream 5 to 6-ish days a week. Yeah, feel free to swing by anytime. And also, before we go, I want to give one huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you guys a million times for all support. Really appreciate it. If you're interested in supporting on Patreon, there should be a link somewhere up here as well as down in the video description below. With all that being said, thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.